Coming up, have you ever seen thick steel rails go around a curve? From cabooses to a cabless slug. And helper engines are called in to push a 2-mile train into town. Spend a day rail fanning in Atlanta, and you never know what you'll see. All that and more is next. This day of rail fanning begins in Tucker, Georgia, which is around 20 miles northeast of downtown Atlanta. You can see the city in the distance. It's May 28, 2023, and the weather is perfect. A little waiting at this location, and someone is on the radio.
B637, engine 3079, north, clear, north end, Tucker.
I'm set up for CSX B637. By now, you probably know I like to use my drone whenever possible, but it's good for more than just shooting video. I'll sometimes take off and use the digital zoom to see what's going on around me. This grainy shot tells me B637 is really close now. It originates in Canadian National Territory in Chicago and goes to Lawrenceville, Georgia. These trains often have CN power on them, but unfortunately, those engines aren't leading today. One of the reasons I chose this spot was because I wanted to see the train crest the top of this hill in Tucker. I had no plans to chase this train today and decided to head toward Atlanta. There's almost always something to see at Norfolk Southern's Inman yard. You can usually spot these specially painted eco units, which were rebuilt from older locomotives to be more environmentally friendly. Today, a whole bunch of them were working the hump. In the lead, a cabless slug. Slugs don't have diesel engines and are paired with a mother unit which provides electricity for their traction motors. Today, all of these units are being remotely controlled. Of course, there are plenty of manned engines moving around too. That 6-axle slug certainly has a distinctive look. This bridge on Marietta Road is usually a pretty good place to watch trains, but you'll typically have a bit of a breeze up here. It sounded like there would be some activity north of here, so I headed up to Smyrna, a suburb of Atlanta. NS 153 was stopped at the signal waiting for someone to pass. I believe this is NS 26A, which originates in Kansas City Southern Territory. Well, actually Canadian Pacific Kansas City, or CPKC territory now. This meet took around 20 minutes, and here it is in fast forward. 153 picks up speed fairly quickly once it gets moving. Next up, I headed back to Atlanta. This is Pine Street, which is a CSX crew change location. It's next to Tilford Yard, which was once a busy part of the CSX system. It's now home to a relatively small TransFlow facility and a new Amazon warehouse, which doesn't appear to be active. But that is not why I'm here. No, if there's a special piece of equipment around, I am all over it. How about this? A continuous welded rail train led by an old ST40-2 with a caboose behind it. That locomotive is ex-Conrail, but I'm not quite sure about the heritage of this bay window caboose. It may also be ex-Conrail. To me, what's really amazing is that even though these trains haul long stretches of rail, they can still go around curves. And I should mention that there are actually 2 cabooses in this shot. One is on display at CSX's Ready Center, where new employees are trained. This one has a cupola. Here, crews would look over the top of the train instead of looking at the sides of it. I first spotted this thing back in 2022 before it was put on display. There's definitely some interesting equipment at the Ready Center, but keep in mind, this place is not open to the public. The following weekend, a CSX crew finally shoved this train into nearby Howell Yard. I was hoping to see this thing in action, but that didn't happen. We do get a closer look at those rails taking a curve, though. Of course, I had to get one more shot of this caboose. My guess would be that it's always assigned to this continuous welded rail train. Believe it or not, I actually spent the night in a bay window caboose once. I'll include a link to that video at the end of this one. Okay, now we're moving on to the south side of Atlanta, where I started hearing some interesting chatter on the radio.
All right, 366, lead engine CP8863 after stopping. Dispatcher special pass at northbound south to that Constitution. From main 1 to main 2. Looking out for the rear, talking to 291, lead engine NS1135, 10,932 feet ahead. Give him a push there, over.
Apparently, NS Train 291 was having problems with one of its locomotives and would need the engines from Train 366 to push it into Atlanta. I sat up here in South Yard and waited. This is near the Southern Railway's old Atlanta motor shop. It's no longer used by Norfolk Southern, but I believe they lease it to a metal company. When the head end of 291 finally passed me, it sounded like both of their engines were running. They'd eventually call another dispatcher to confirm what the plan was.
They want 366 to cut off that south yard or whenever you get the spring. And then if your engine is working, we want to take you in the yard as quickly as possible. Get that engine swapped out for you.
The train started to slow down as they approached the signal at Spring.
Probably about 20 more, I'm gonna stop.
Spring is a location on the railroad in an area of Atlanta called the Gulch, which is where the city's terminal station used to stand. The engineers on either end of the train were also coordinating this move.
So we're just right till you stop then? Okay, all right.
It was tough to see the pusher engines from where I was, and the drone's digital zoom would come in handy again. And keep in mind, those pusher engines were around 2 miles from the head end of 291.
All right, you stopped in Spring, you want the other job to cut off now? That is correct, 291 over.
At this point, 291 was on its own, and the helper engines would need to return to their train.
Cut off from that 291, ready to go back to our train when we can.
I barely caught them heading back south, but check out the power. A leased WFRX XBNSF EMD ST70 Mac and a CPKC GE ES44 AC behind it. And yeah, look closely and you'll notice both locomotives have the same road number, 8863. I guess I'd call that a lucky catch, and a good way to end an active day of rail fanning in Atlanta. Okay, so it's not all that uncommon for the crew of another train to be called in to use their engines to help push a stalled or disabled train. However, dedicated manned helper units used to get trains over challenging terrain are becoming rare. One place you can still find them is on the Norfolk Southern line that runs through the Allegheny Mountains. Of course, this line is home to the famous Horseshoe Curve. Roger Puda took these stunning photos. Here's a Penn Central helper set in action in 1969. These days, you're more likely to see radio-controlled, unmanned distributed power units, or DPUs, in the middle or at the rear of a train. Anyway, that's it for now. As always, thanks for watching.